Hi, Aquarius, Sun and Rising. Welcome to your November 2021 Astro Update. It's Raina here. So, you have an interesting situation going on, and I think it would be very helpful for me to speak to any Aquarian that I know well, and I'm trying to think about somebody, not just an acquaintance, but somebody that I know very well. But how has life been in the last year or so since you've had Saturn and Jupiter in Aquarius? And now that these two planets have gone direct by November and are gaining ground, you might feel like you are gaining ground. So I don't know if you felt any kind of slowdown with these two very powerful planets, albeit not personal planets, but they're still very powerful. And they will be continuing in Aquarius. As a matter of fact, Saturn will be continuing throughout next year as well. It's just that Jupiter is spending a lot more of a brief time here. Jupiter will be going back into Pisces. It only, got up to about 2 degrees of Pisces at the end of this year. And then Jupiter will come completely out of its shadow in 2022, I guess, because you have to look at what degree it retrograded to see where it needs to go back to. And I'm looking here at the end of December, and it's only at 0 degrees of Pisces. But, that's neither here nor there. You probably will still feel very good. So anyway, as the month begins, a fellow fixed sign, Scorpio, is really front and center here. The sun is there. Now for you, this is career stuff. So this could be heating up for you, being highlighted. On the 4th, there's a new moon at 12 degrees of Scorpio. So that's very nice. New beginnings, new opportunities for you. On the 5th, Venus goes from Sag to Capricorn. So Sag is, for you, Aquarius, Sag is the house that you rule, the 11th house. So that is a very compatible transit. When you have planets transiting in that 11th, that's very nice for you because that's the house that you rule. So you are all about that. But now we have it going into your 12th house. Now, the 11th house is very social. So with Venus being in the 11th house in October and for the almost a week in November, the first week in November, you could have very easily been feeling like you were connecting with friends a lot, were popular, and that sort of thing. When Venus goes into the 12th house, it's kind of undercover, and Venus can be about pleasure. Well, you can take pleasure in your solitude. It's one thing, I was just pointing this out with another sign, that there's a difference between solitude and loneliness, being alone and being lonely. And this means that sometimes if a person sees it as a lack of something, then they suffer. But it can be this feeling of spaciousness when you're alone because you don't have to answer to anyone. You don't have to deal with anybody else's stuff. And so there's a lot to be said for that. This can also be if you have met someone, maybe even through the social interactions that you've had or the groups that you belong to, that you're not ready to bring this relationship to the forefront or whatever. When I say relationship, I don't mean it's some kind of serious thing, but even whatever that level is for you, that you don't want other people to know about this, not because you're ashamed, but because it's something that you want to cultivate in private, that you don't want to just allow everybody to have their 2 cents about whatever it is. And sometimes there might be something else going on that makes you want to be a little bit secretive. Like if, for instance, you are involved with somebody who is married or you're married, then that's a clandestine, maybe it is like an affair. And by the way, even though I'm speaking of that in a very casual way, it doesn't mean that I endorse that behavior. I'm just living in the realm of reality. Also, any kind of soulmate type of situation. The 12th house is about past lives, karma, and you could fall in love with somebody that is, that meets that criteria. Namely, you meet them and it's like you've known them forever, that type of deal. You've heard people say things like that. Maybe there are some people out there who have already experienced something like that. On the same day, the 5th, Mercury goes into Scorpio. So now you have the situation with Mercury in the 10th house. So this could be something that is connected to speaking with people who are in positions of authority. The first thing that comes to my mind is if you are interviewing for certain work, but the 10th house is more like career rather than the work itself. So sometimes I might think, I think it might be something more along the lines of you're having communication with people who are in high places, whether they are I was going to say controlling you. I don't like to use the word control, but whether they are your overlords or not is a different story. But you might even be in that position yourself. So an example would be academia, where the mind, Mercury or communication, is coming from a source of authority. And somebody who is stepping into this role as a professor, for instance, might be just that type of person. Also, just your words being given a public airing, if you will. So people knowing about you through your words. So writers, putting it out there. On the 19th, we have the lunar eclipse at 27 degrees of Taurus. So here I am talking about Scorpio. Now we're talking about this other fixed sign, Taurus, which is in your 4th house of home and family. So that's certainly very interesting because we're talking about a lunar eclipse. The 4th house isn't just about that. It can be your mother. Now, some people will say the father. I sometimes just say, what they I can't remember what I call it. Oh gosh, family of origin. That's what I call it sometimes. But the bottom line is that a lunar eclipse can let go of the grasp of that, and how that can play out if you have a problematic parent that has always been, trying to control you, for instance. And the more nurturing parent would be the 4th house. But I would say it doesn't necessarily translate to that. I like to say the mother is the 4th house. And let's say you've had this very problematic relationship with her, and finally you're able to just end that relationship. Now that probably sounds horrible to a lot of people. I don't necessarily think that sounds horrible to too many Aquarians, unless this is your rising sign and maybe your sun sign is Cancer. But for Aquarian sun signs, you probably have experienced, a good number of you, oppression as it relates to family, because the very nature of what Aquarius stands for is in stark contrast to what the demands of a family are. And Aquarius is such a contrarian as a sign that a lot of you dislike any type of situation where you are forced to be part of a group, because then you feel like you have to conform to their standards. And yet your sign rules the house, the 11th house, and part of that are groups. But you don't want to belong to those groups, because then you're forced to forfeit your own individuality being in a group. So you'd like to stay aloof from the group, but at the same time you champion the collective. And the family is another form of the collective. It is, if you have a very open-minded family, a very laissez-faire, the parents are not like super strict, they let their children experiment and explore, then you probably had an amazing childhood. But if you had authoritarian parents, parents who were stuck in the past, or you felt were narrow-minded, prejudiced, whatever you want to say, you may have felt a sense of alienation from them. And if they tried to force you to do what they wanted you to do, that might have felt like really not okay. And if it persisted into adulthood, you finally may be able to say goodbye, and say it in love, not saying F you, but to a parent, a troublesome parent. Also, this is the house of childhood. So if you have felt trapped by the past, and for the sun in Aquarius, this can especially be problematic if you have inner planets in Pisces, like Mercury in Pisces or Venus in Pisces, Mars in Pisces, especially Venus, and if your moon is in, Cancer or Pisces or something like that, because there's just that dwelling on the past that is very commonplace. And so it becomes a conflict within the person. This allows you to let go of that those experiences, if they were traumatic, negative, what have you, so that it doesn't define the rest of your life. So it really is a sense of freedom. In my mind, it came into my mind, the Tower moment, and that is the release of something. But this can give you insight into your past, which does create the present, which creates the sense that people have right now, their attitudes, what informs them, the patterns that they experience to this day. So it's not just about some idle speculation. It's really for the important purpose of being able to change. On the 21st, the sun goes into Sagittarius, and 3 days later, Mercury goes into Sagittarius. So this is, again, going back to that situation with Venus. Now we have the sun and Mercury going into that 11th house. And this is really nice. It's almost like having your birthday in a sense, because you're having the sun in the 11th house in your house, and that can feel very nice. This is social energy once again, and maybe if you are someone who is dating someone but you don't want your friends to know about it, you're just kind of almost like leading two lives, and you're keeping this from them, but I'm sure that a lot of you want to just get to know the other person without outside interference, and you will be getting back into, the swing of things, including sharing this happy experience with your friends. And so, or maybe you're working on a creative project behind the scenes and you just have been doing that. And at the same time, you are touching base with people that you really care about. Now, this dovetails quite nicely for the holiday season, so, or the start of it. So I think that you're going to have a very happy time this year, Aquarius. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care.